friends, Chubby Meeple back with another Kickstarter preview for you, and today we're going to take a look at a card game called Charmed and Dangerous. This is from designer Robert Gallerani and published by Third World Studios. Let's jump to the table. I'll give you a quick overview of how this game plays, and then we'll come back here and I'll give you my final thoughts. Charmed and Dangerous is a cooperative card game for 1 to 4 players that sees the players taking on the role of reimagined fairy tale princesses and working together to collectively take down a villainess in her lair. What you're looking at is the play area made up of the Forces of Evil grid, or the foe grid, a Forces of Evil deck, and this deck is comprised of cards that are based on locations. They're based on the lair that you select. There's a certain deck that goes with the lair. It will also be loaded with Master Strokes and Lair Fortification cards. 4 Master Strokes, 4 Lair Fortification cards that are shuffled throughout the deck, and they're evenly distributed at the start of the game so that there's essentially 40 cards. You make 4 stacks of 10. Throw 1 Master Stroke and 1 Lair Fortification into each stack of 10, shuffle those stacks individually, and then stack them on top of each other so they're kind of evenly distributed to start the game. You'll also have your villainess that you will select. Now, your villainess that you're playing will begin the game hidden. So you know you're fighting the Dark Fairy, but you don't have any information on her stats and how you take this particular villainess down. You do know, looking at the ability card here on the Dark Fairy, that if any princess has more than 5 of this symbol, which is the fierce symbol, and I'll talk about that in a second, then the Dark Fairy will reveal herself. So at that point, she'll reveal herself. You'll know what stats are necessary to defeat her. And for her Master Stroke, anytime a Master Stroke card gets drawn out of the FOE grid here or revealed, all players have to discard all of the charming cards that are in their hand. So you're going to be taking this villainess down cooperatively. There is one way to win. To win, you have to cooperatively defeat the villainess, get her to reveal herself, and have enough collective, what they call facets, we'll discuss that in a second as well, to take her down. There are multiple ways you can lose, though, as with all cooperative games. You can lose if you need to draw a card from the Dangerous deck, which is this deck of cards that make up the princess's hands. If you ever need to draw a dangerous card from the deck and this deck is depleted, you lose the game. If a card effect of any kind, a card effect, a threat effect from the FOE grid, or part of a player's turn, causes you to discard cards from your hand and you cannot discard that number of cards, you lose the game. You're lost in defeat. And if at any time the villainess has collected a total of 5 Lair Fortifications and Master Strokes, any combination of those, if they collect 5 or more, then the lair has become impenetrable and the princesses also lose the game. So there are multiple ways you can lose this game. Now I want to talk a little bit about the princesses. The princesses themselves, as I said, are reimagined fairy tale princesses. So you'll see on the table we have Briar Rosa and we have Gretel out here. And I want to take a closer look at these cards. You have first of all, some really gorgeous artwork. This is Briar Rosa. She's the dream necromancer here. All of the princesses are going to have facets. There are 4 facets that a princess can possibly have. You can have, at the top of the card, which Briar Rosa does not have, you can have Fierce, which is a red diamond indicator, usually with a 1 in it. On the left-hand side of the card is where, if the princess has the facet of Harmony, you will see a green circle with a number in it. You do see a blue heart down here on Briar Rosa's card. This is her Majesty facet. She has 1 in the Majesty facet. And then on the right-hand side in this little cube icon here, the little hexagon here, you have a 1 in Charm. So Briar Rosa starts the game out with 1 in Majesty and 1 in Charm, and that's important for defeating the threats that will come out in this FOE grid as we go along. Also, on the back of Briar Rosa's card, she has a special ability. Briar Rosa has the ability to curse herself with sleep. If she begins her turn cursed with sleep, then she can, at the start of her turn, take a card from the discard pile rather than drawing 2 from the Dangerous deck at the start of her turn. So a little bit of a cool special ability that she has there. We'll take a look at Gretel over here. Gretel very much set up the same way. Again, really cool character art. All these princesses have incredible artwork with them. Very powerful characters. Gretel has 1 in the Fierce that we talked about earlier. She also has 1 in Charm, but she does not have anything for Majesty at the bottom of her card or Harmony off to the left-hand side. Gretel's special ability is that her Sugar Rush, after she completes a foe challenge, so after she completes a challenge from the grid here, she can discard a Charming card from her hand in order to take the Explore action again. So she could complete multiple challenges on her turn. So that is what Gretel will do. And then just to take a quick look at the other princesses that I have here in the prototype. And again, these are all prototype components, just as noted, so there may be some changes to component quality, art, those kinds of things. These are prototype components that you're looking at on this video. But we have Dorothy Gale. She is the Weather Wizard here. She has 1 in Charm and 1 in the Harmony. Nothing in, or I take that back, 1 in Majesty and 1 in Harmony. Nothing in Charm or Fierce. And then we have the Arcane Trickster, who has 1 in Fierce, 1 in Charm, but no Majesty or Harmony. And they also have their own special abilities. So Dorothy Gale here has an Over the Rainbow ability, and our Arcane Trickster has the Magic Club that have some information on them there. So these princesses are off camera for the purposes of this particular video, just so we can focus on essentially a 2-player game here. Now, gameplay in Charmed and Dangerous is very simple. On a player's turn, they're going to begin their turn by drawing 2 cards, and then they have a choice of 3 actions they can take. So let's say it's Briar Rosa's turn to start the game. Each princess is dealt a hand of 5 cards from the Dangerous deck, and those cards are going to be made up of a mixture of cards they can play that will boost their facets, as well as other cards, they're called Charming cards, that can be used to run away from threats, as well as can be discarded in conjunction with other cards to activate other abilities. So the object of the game, as I said, is to defeat the villainous, and that's going to require the princesses to explore and find items, defeat threats and find items that will boost their facet stats. And we'll talk about why you want to do that here very soon. So to start Briar Rosa's turn, we have her regular hand of 5 cards. She draws 2 cards from the Dangerous deck, adds those to her hand, and then she has the ability, or she has one of 3 options. She can either explore, meaning she picks one of the 9 cards in the foe grid, and we'll turn that card face up, revealing the card. So let's reveal this card. I have no idea what these cards are because I did not look at them ahead of time. So we revealed the Totem Ogre. The Totem Ogre has this fierce icon up here. What this means is that if I defeat this challenge, I can slot this, as long as my princess already has the facet of fierce, I can slot this and add 1 fierce stat to her particular, to her fierce abilities. This card here, the Totem Ogre, has a threat level of 3 fierce, meaning I have to have a total of 3 fierce in order to defeat this Totem Ogre. And you'll also notice that the Totem Ogre can only be defeated by a squad challenge, and I'll discuss what a squad challenge is here. There's also the 2 Majesty at the bottom, so I could actually slot this card for Majesty or Fierce once this challenge is defeated. So, now that that card has been turned face up, I have 3 choices. I can either choose to challenge this card as a solo challenge, meaning I'm going to try and take out this card by myself without any help from any of the other princesses at the table. Or I can do a squad challenge. Now with the Totem Ogre that we just revealed, the Totem Ogre can only be defeated by a squad challenge, which means I have to rely on the other princesses if I'm going to defeat this. The other option that I have is I can run away. If I see that this threat level of 3 fierce is just too high for me, I don't have the cards in my hand, I can discard either a Charming card from my hand, and your Charming cards look like this. So I can discard one of these Charming cards to run away. Or, if I don't have any Charming cards, I can discard any 3 cards from my hand of cards. So in this case, I've got 7 cards right now. I can discard any 3 of these to run away and not face that. So we need a total of 3 fierce. So in a solo challenge would have me comparing my facets plus playing any cards from my hand to try to defeat the threat on my own. So I would be trying to meet this threat alone without any help from any of the other princesses. If I successfully do that, I get to take the card and slot it on my princess where I already have a facet or an item equipped that gives me that facet. So right now, Briar Rosa could only slot defeated foes if that foe has Charming, has Charm or Majesty on it. So I could put the Charm over here, or I could put the Majesty, and they just simply slot under your card and add to those stats. If I successfully defeat a threat with a solo challenge, I get to draw a card from the Dangerous deck and add it to my hand at the end of that challenge. And of course, any cards that I played during that will get discarded. For a squad challenge, I'm relying on the other princesses at the table to help me out. So again, I need to have a facet, a 3 or more fierce facet in order to defeat this totem ogre. Briar Rosa has no fierce, so she's not going to do very well against this thing on her own, which is okay in this case because this can only be defeated by a squad challenge anyway. Now Gretel has 1 fierce. However, in a squad challenge, the other facets, the facets that are printed on the other princess cards and any cards that have been used to boost it, those facets do not matter. In a squad challenge, the only thing that the other princesses can do is play cards from their hand in order to assist you. So we would need to look at Gretel's hand here. Gretel would have to be able to play cards to get us up to the 3 facet. So right now we're at 0. She's got a couple charming cards in her hand. I have something that will boost charm, which doesn't help. We've got Sanctuary, which I could play. This would let me, any cards that I played in to help out during a squad challenge, this card would let me return those cards to my hand rather than discarding them, which could be good. The only other card I have in my hand is Shooting Star, which gains 1 in all facets for the turn. So that would give me 2 fierce for Gretel. Well, actually, I take that back. It would only add 1 fierce because her fierce printed on her card does not matter. So if we played that card, we would only get up to 1 fierce. So what we're going to do in this case is we're simply going to discard a charming card and run away. When we discard the charming card and run away, the threat stays face up in the foe area, which is not necessarily a good thing because it can force us to discard cards, and I'll discuss that in a second. So we've done that. So we've done the explore action. That's one option that a princess has on the turn, is to explore, flipping over a card, and then you challenge that newly revealed card either solo or with a squad challenge, or you can simply run away if you don't have enough to defeat it. The other option you have on your turn is to simply challenge. If there's already a card face up in the grid, so on a future turn this totem ogre will be face up in the grid, a princess can choose to just straight up challenge that face up card without doing an explore and flipping a card over. So we talked about the solo challenge. If Briar Rosa had been able to defeat this ogre on her own, she would get to draw a card for successfully completing a challenge. If the princesses work together on a squad challenge, Briar Rosa does not get to draw a card because it was a squad challenge. However, she would simply take the defeated threat and add it to her princess card, building up her own facets. However, any princesses that helped out by contributing cards to the squad challenge get to draw cards. So it keeps their hand size back up, so they're not getting to their turn and not having a lot of cards in their hand. So we have that. You have the explore option, flipping over a card and challenging it. You have the challenge option, which lets you simply challenge an already face-up card. The third option that a princess has on her turn is to just rest. If you choose to rest, you're going to draw your 2 cards as normal at the start of your turn. However, you're not going to take any other actions. You're simply going to remove any curses that have accumulated on your princess, which we haven't talked about yet, but you can accumulate curses throughout the game. You can remove all of the curses on your princess, and that will end your turn. Speaking of curses, I want to look at those really quickly before we move to the end of the turn and how things proceed from there. There are 3 possible curses that a princess can get hit with by various cards being revealed, various things happening throughout the game. One of those is poison. If a princess gets poisoned and takes one of these poison curses, you simply take the poison curse card and place it next to the princess who it applies to so that you know that they've taken that status effect. When you get poisoned, first of all, none of the curses can be removed until your next turn. So if you take a curse, you can't choose to rest and immediately remove it. You can't play any cards that would remove it until your next turn. So you're at least going to be cursed for a turn. When you're poisoned, you will discard a card. You don't draw any cards at the start of your turn, and at the start of your next turn, you're going to discard another card. So poison gets rid of cards and kind of mills cards out of your hand, which is not a good thing. The sleep curse, again, cannot be removed until your next turn. With the sleep curse, you still draw your 2 cards at the beginning of your turn, but you don't take any other actions. However, the villainous and the Lair actions will still trigger, and we haven't talked about that yet, but the villainous and the Lair take turns after each player's turn, and we'll get there in just a second. As we saw with Briar Rosa, she can choose to take a sleep curse voluntarily, and then this will allow her, instead of drawing her 2 cards at the start of her turn, she could pull cards out of the dangerous discard pile and start kind of recycling some of those cards. And then the third curse we have is caged. Obviously, you still cannot remove this curse until your next turn. While you're caged, you cannot participate in any challenges. So this allows you to, or basically prevents you from assisting in any squad challenges. And you can't participate in any other challenges, so you couldn't do any solo challenges or things out here as well with the exploration. At the start of your turn, though, you're going to get to draw 3 dangerous cards from the deck instead of 2, which can be good. It can also be bad because, again, one of the loss conditions is running out of cards in that dangerous deck and not being able to redraw them. So having completed a princess's turn, Briar Rose's turn is over. She was not able. We chose to discard a charming card to run away. The next thing that happens is the villainous and the Lair get to take their actions and get to complete their actions. And the way that works is, first we look at the Lair. In this case, we are using the Shadow Keep Lair. The Shadow Keep has an ability here that says, when the forces of evil bolster their numbers, all empty spaces in the FOE grid are refilled. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Some other Lairs that you may run into throughout the game will have other abilities on them, other conditions. Some of them are passive abilities that just happen throughout the game. Some of them get triggered by certain other effects, and so on and so forth. So there's some different things that will happen there. So the first thing that happens after the princess's turn is the Lair effect. In this case, we have a passive Lair effect that's just going to be on all the time. So whenever the forces of evil bolster their numbers, we're going to refill all of the empty spaces in the grid. Bolstering numbers is the next thing that happens. The forces of evil are going to bolster their forces. Let's say we had defeated this totem ogre. We now have an empty space. If we had a couple of empty spaces, normally bolstering would simply mean we refill one of them. So we simply take the top card of the forces of evil deck, we fill in one of those empty spaces, and we proceed. Because of the Lair that we have, the Lair says that we would refill all empty spaces. So if those 2 spaces were empty, we would refill both of those. If on the forces of evil turn there are no empty grid spaces, nothing refills. However, all players must discard 2 cards from their hand. So in the case of what we're seeing here, all players, Briar Rosa and Gretel, would each have to discard 2 cards from their hand because the forces of evil were not able to bolster their numbers. It's kind of a penalty for not defeating any challenges throughout the challenge phase. Once that happens, we do the villainous turn. The villainous turn, the first thing we do is we check her condition for her reveal condition. In this case, we're looking to see if any princesses have more than 5 fierce on their facets. None of them do. Briar Rose is at 0. Gretel is still at 1. So the Dark Fairy is not going to reveal herself. If one of the princesses was at 5, we would simply flip the Dark Fairy over, revealing her card art, which, by the way, is absolutely stunning. And then we would have the stats that are needed to defeat the villainous. The villainous here, the Dark Fairy, has a threat level of 12 fierce, 5 harmony, and 10 charm. We don't need any majesty to defeat her, but we need quite a lot of fierce and charm in here. The Dark Fairy is also listed as the Queen of Hell. Once she reveals herself, all foe cards add +3 fierce to their threat level. So all of these cards that are out here, for example, if she were to reveal herself while this totem ogre is out, the threat level in this totem ogre is now 6 fierce because they add 3 fierce. Some of the other cards that will come out here will have different levels. So for example, this Molten Sugar Skulls has a threat level of 2 harmony and 1 charm. There would be 3 fierce added to this card as well. So it just makes everything in the grid that much harder to defeat when the Dark Fairy comes out. Now, once the villainess has revealed herself, so we just took the villainous, we do the Lair turn, we refill, bolster the numbers, we do the villainous turn, and then we would proceed to the next princess. Once the villainess has revealed herself, and you know who you're up against, you know what stats you need, on your turn as a princess, you have the ability to challenge the villainous anytime instead of exploring the grid. When you challenge the villainous, there are a couple of rules. First of all, every villainous challenge is always a squad challenge. No princess is going in solo against the villainous. That's a little bit crazy. You would need to have crazy high stats in order for that to happen. So it's a squad challenge. However, it's a little bit different from the normal squad challenge. In the normal squad challenge, the princesses do not add their facet scores together. So if Briar Rosa was helping Gretel with a squad challenge, Briar Rosa's stats for her facets do not factor into that challenge, only the cards that she plays. When you're challenging the villainous, however, no players play any cards from their hand. The princesses must simply have a total combined score between all of the facets, so what's printed on their cards, as well as the defeated threats that have helped boost those numbers up. If they happen to have a total, in the case of the Dark Fairy, a total of 12 Fierce, 5 Harmony, and 10 Charm, or obviously higher than those numbers as well, then they would defeat the villainous and they would win the game. That is the only way to win the game. The other thing I want to talk about is with the grid. So that's how play is going to proceed. You're going to have one princess turn. They're going to draw 2 cards, either Explore, challenge an already face-up card, or Rest. Then the Lair is going to take its turn, doing any abilities that are triggered there. You're going to bolster the numbers by filling 1 empty space on the grid if you can. Otherwise, players have to discard 2 cards. You'll then take the Villainous turn. So you will check to see if the reveal condition has been met. You'll then trigger any additional abilities on that card. And then you move to the other princess, who will draw 2 cards and take their turn as normal. Play will proceed in that manner, with a princess taking their turn, the Lair, the bolstering numbers, and the villainous, then the next princess, and then we do Lair, bolstering numbers, and the villainous, and then back to the princess. Play is going to proceed like that until the players win by defeating the villainous, or they lose because they can't draw cards from the villainous deck, or the dangerous deck, or they can't discard when told to do so. If, when exploring, you turn over an item card, so let's flip this card over. That's not the right card. Let's flip this card over. We flip over an item card. Items work a little bit differently than threats. So we pull this up, we flipped over the Obsidian Blade. This is an item card. First of all, it says item on it. It also gives you the gold border. You'll notice the threat cards don't have that gold border around the outside of the cards. They're easy to identify. When an item card gets turned up, you're going to immediately resolve the when revealed effect printed on the item. And then you will immediately get to equip this item to the princess who's currently taking their turn. So the Obsidian Blade here says when the Obsidian Blade is revealed, you can choose any face-up foe card and equip it to your princess, and then discard any other face-up foe cards that are on the grid. So we'll do this. We'll say Briar Rosa took this turn. I can either equip this to Briar Rosa to give her 1 Fierce or 1 Harmony. And to equip that, I would simply tuck it under. Let's say we're going to give her 1 Fierce. I simply would tuck it under the card. Now when I defeat, so when that's revealed, actually before I would equip that, I would get to take any face-up card from the grid and equip it to my princess. So we're going to equip it down here. Again, the totem ogre can either be equipped for 2 Majesty or 1 additional Fierce. Briar Rosa cannot be equipped with Fierce at this point because she doesn't have any Fierce facets. She doesn't have an item that's giving her Fierce, and it's not printed on her card. So she can simply take this and add 2 Majesty by simply slotting the ogre under her card. So now she has a total of 3 Majesty that can be used, and then she gets to take the Obsidian Blade and equip it as well. So now she has Fierce. And the order is very important because the way that read is that when the card is revealed, she can take something and equip it to the princess. So she wouldn't equip the item and then be able to equip that ogre to add an additional Fierce point. If you defeat a threat in the grid and you cannot equip that card to your princess because they don't have that facet at that point, you can simply set that card aside. You'll be able to equip it later. Equipping cards is not required, so even if you have the ability to equip a card because you have those facets, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can simply set the cards aside. They can be equipped anytime during your own turn. It has to be your turn in order to equip those cards. And if you have cards set aside that we're adding, so for example with Briar Rosa, she can't add any Harmony cards right now because there's no Harmony printed on her card and she has no items adding Harmony. So what we do instead, if she were to defeat a grid or a grid challenge, a foe challenge out here that would allow her to add Harmony, she couldn't add it. That card would simply get set aside. And if she were to find an item later that added Harmony, she then could equip any cards that were sitting next to her player card in order to boost that Harmony up a little bit faster. So you do have to have the facet either printed on your card or have an item that's granting you that facet before you can start boosting it up with challenges. So that is Charmed and Dangerous. 1 to 4 player cooperative card game that plays probably 30 minutes. It's a pretty quick game that's there. I really enjoy the gameplay in this. It's got a simple rule set, so it's not overly complex to learn, but there are some interesting decisions that have to be made along the way. As far as timing is when I play certain cards, when I defeat challenges from the foe grid, Am I going to slot this foe to help my fierce stats, to help my charm stats, to help my majesty stats? So there's different choices to be made, and I really like that the designer took the time to actually give, the threats that are in that grid multiple stats that I could possibly slot onto my princesses. So it makes it just a little bit harder to make those decisions, and it's not the game making the decision for me. I think I would have liked it a lot less if the threats only had one stat that kind of told me where I was going to be slotting those things. So I definitely like that decision. I absolutely love the art that is in this game. You're looking here, the princesses themselves, Dorothy Gale, the Dark Fairy. I think these are really gorgeous, well-drawn cards. The colors really let the princesses pop. They're bright and shiny and colorful. And then all the threats that you face are, while the art is fantastic, they do give you that feel of kind of a darker, grimmer, you're up against something dark force-wise. So I really like the way they portray that. Of course, the charm cards, the charming cards, having the handsome prince standing there, they're ready to bail the princesses out, help get rid of their various curses, as well as helping them run away, providing a distraction so they can run away from the various threats. I really enjoyed that as well. I've played this now 3 times I played it more than 3, but I played it 3 with an actual group. I've done a lot of solo plays with it. I have yet to win it playing solo, and every time I've played it solo, I always run out of dangerous cards. So I'm making some bad decisions on that part. I haven't quite solved the puzzle. Playing in a group, though, the 3 games that I had where we played with a group, our group did win it one time, and that was a pretty cool, high-fiving moment. We actually were able to pull it off, and we played that at the full 4-player count. So a lot more options, a lot more choices there. And the game scales really well. Like I said, I've played it solo, I've played it with 4, and I've played it with 2. I haven't tried it at 3 yet, but it scales very well because while you have more princesses and more characters to provide stats and to help out with the squad challenges, you're burning through the dangerous deck a lot faster because more people are drawing cards. So definitely, if you have a chance, if you got a group that you think would really like a quick 30-minute cooperative card game, something you're going to knock out in under an hour, definitely check out Charmed and Dangerous on Kickstarter now. You can hit the link down in the description of this video to jump over to the Kickstarter page. If you have questions, dump them in the comments. I will answer those to the best of my ability. And until next time, keep gaming, friends.